Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. Tonight, in the series of Pioneers of the Three Principles, we have Dr. Aaron Turner as our speaker, our introducer. We were talking a little bit beforehand, and we discussed this beforehand, and we said, well, tell us how you got involved into the principles and what you're doing now.
Ready?
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 If you, I'll mute myself.
So as Svea said, I was going to talk a little bit about how I came to see any relevance or value in the principles, a little bit what that has done for me, and I can say a little bit about what I'm up to now. And then I'm really, really happy to talk about whatever you want to talk about, since we're here together. I think talking about how I saw relevance in the principle, I always find a fun thing to talk about because there were a good number of years where I could not see any relevance in the principle whatsoever. I couldn't even imagine why anybody would. George and Linda Pransky are my aunt and uncle, and I came across the principles because I had visited them, on family vacations. And I think they could both see that given how introverted and analytical and self-conscious and slightly anxious I was as a teenager, that the principles would obviously make all the difference in the world to me. So I think, they went out of their way to make sure I got a chance to get some benefit of it. So, I would visit once or twice a year. I don't know how regularly, but I definitely went on multiple trainings with Dickon and Judy and Keith and Sandy Crott and George and Linda, Mark Howard. And I could, when they would talk, I couldn't hear anything that meant anything. It all just seemed ridiculous. And what's really interesting to me, which really influences what I do now, is once I did take an interest in the principles, which I did because George paid me to do it, it was inherently interesting. And out of that interest naturally came change. And I would say that coming across the principles and actually taking notice of what they were saying, not agreeing, not disagreeing, not buying, just taking notice of what they were saying, was one of the most valuable things I've ever done and changed my life beyond recognition in ways that I had no idea was even possible. So before I came across the principles, I was not looking for anything. I was perfectly content with the way life was. I wasn't happy, but I didn't expect to be happy. I didn't have the kind of relationship I wanted, but I figured, you don't get to get everything you want. So I was kind of okay with that. And I was just kind of perfectly content, although I didn't feel content, working away at my life, trying to make the progress that I thought I wanted to make to do as well as I could. And actually, I remember when I was about the time I first came across George and Linda, when George first said to me, "Oh, look, I think the work we're doing is really interesting. You should get interested in it." And I thought, well, he's pretty easily entertained. Takes a bit more than that to get me interested. Um, I actually had a girlfriend, and because I was so self-conscious and I think ultimately boring, so I was just full of potential, but not much fun to be with in the actual time, So I think maybe she was willing to date me because of that potential. She tried to get me to go on a self-development training. So she went to the forum and she asked me to go to the forum, and I just could not get behind how aggressive these people were about their development. I was thinking, why can't you just be how you are? Why you got so I just really had a lot of resistance and judgment about anyone that wanted to be better or happier or think about their thinking. God forbid you think about your thinking. Why won't you just live your life? So I had all these ideas. And plus add to the mix that all of the people that were teaching the principles looked like happy fools. And then I mean, there was no doubt in the fact that they were very happy, but it seemed to be because they refused to think about anything. So I was like, yeah, I could be happy. Then I have to be totally oblivious, like these, happy fools. So I wasn't interested at all. And having been through 5 trainings or 5 trainings, I was absolutely convinced that what they were talking about was ridiculous. Now, here's the interesting part. I didn't know what they were saying. I literally didn't know what they were saying. I thought I did because in my experience, I'd heard it, assessed it, dismissed it, moved on. But unbeknownst to me, I hadn't even heard it. I really hadn't even heard it. So actually, when Sphere was talking earlier about why is it that it doesn't catch on in our training, so we work with a lot of businesses, and it's always the people that don't listen that don't like it. So I'm always having the discussion with people. Listen, with all due respect, I don't think you should pass judgment on this program. Why not? You didn't listen. Yeah, I know, because it was rubbish. Well, how did you know it was rubbish if you didn't listen? Well, because I knew it was rubbish. And I'm trying to say to them, look, I'm fine you didn't like it, but I'm not fine you giving a judgment on something you didn't listen to. It makes no sense. But that was me. That was completely me. So it was only when George paid me to research what they were doing that I really took an interest in, okay, so what are they saying? Like, what is their frame of reference? What's their framework? What do they think? What's their description of the mind? And interestingly, it was all brand new to me. It was all completely brand new to me. And it's such an interesting illustration. It's like, in my experience, if you take a neutral look at the principles, you will catch a glimpse of truth and value. There's no if, and, or buts. I've never seen an exception. So one of the times I saw this in action with a group is I was invited to be part of a senior army leadership training for generals. And I was on the core faculty. So one of the core themes of this training, which ran all week, was your clarity of mind, your state of mind. If you want to be a better leader, you got to see how your state of mind drives that. Like everything, your clarity of mind, your level of consciousness completely drives people's outcomes. That's what I see in any field I've been in. Your level of consciousness drives how beneficial your outcomes are or how dysfunctional your outcomes are. You can literally measure the future by the feeling you're in. So I get up and I say, well, now we're going to talk about your state of mind. And you could literally see and hear and feel people's eyes rolling like, oh my God, you're kidding me. We're here for a week. There's lives at stake and I'm listening to this crap. And luckily, it's not like I can't relate because that's how I felt in the trainings I sat in. So I basically said to them, look, you guys, this is about state of mind. In my experience, most people never look at that. They're like, yeah, well, most civilians don't, but we're in the army. We know all about that. There's no way some semi-trained civilian is going to teach us anything about clarity of mind. I'm telling you. So it's really funny because it's one of those moments where I was totally stumped. I didn't know what to say, but mind is an infinite intelligence. So it kind of popped into my head. When I gave up, I'm like, oh, I'm stumped. It came into my head, well, look, they got to be here anyway. If they don't listen, they're wasting their time. If they listen and it is rubbish, at least they'll know that. So basically, I said to them, look, you guys, you're here anyway. If you don't listen to me and you think it's a bunch of rubbish and you don't listen, you're literally wasting this time because you won't know how bad it is. You won't know if it is for sure terrible. You'll have just guessed. The only way you cannot waste your time is to actually listen, and then you'll know for sure it's a waste of time, or if there's any potential benefit, you'll get it. So I made this deal with them. They said, all right, well, we don't want to listen to you if you're going to manipulate us. I said, well, what do you mean? They said, well, talk us into some cockamamie theory. I said, okay, so I'll just lay it out for you neutrally and you do the listening. And if you're not listening, I'm going to call you on it and you're going to have to get back to listening. They said, okay, fine. But if you start arguing the case and like, trying to convince us, we're going to call you. I said, fantastic. That's fantastic. No problem. Which was new for me because I so desperately want people to get the benefit I know is available. Up until that point, I would generally argue the case, and I would basically try to mind wrestle people out of their opinions to get them open-minded. And I would go to the mat if necessary. So what was really interesting about that group is they really got impacted. They really got impacted. And it humbled me because I realized the impact is because it points to a truth, not because I make a good argument or I give a good example or I tell a good story. Because that group got seriously impacted and they thought I'd manipulated them because they couldn't understand how they'd gotten so quiet, how they'd gotten so much value, why they thought it was so useful material. And it really showed me, wow, this is powerful because it allows people to glimpse a truth that's not structured by their made up thinking. Right. And that's what happened to me. When I started taking an interest in the principles, I started to see my thinking. And when I saw my thinking, I started to get options. So you might have heard me say this before, but until the age of 25, when I started listening to the principles, I'd never had a relationship that was longer than 3 months. And I didn't really understand why. As soon as I started to see what Sydney Banks was pointing to when I was doing the research, which was mental health, wisdom, universal intelligence was standard. Like that was the nature, that was the essence of the mind. So actually, happiness was natural and effortless. Well-being, confidence was natural and effortless. And it was only interrupted by our thought. And that wasn't really a problem because thought is not really real or solid. So the only real problem that gets in the way of people's profound intelligence and happiness and love and well-being is the fact that they take thought too seriously. They think it's real, or they, like me, I thought I was listening, so I thought that was true. I wasn't listening. I just thought I was listening. So when I saw that that's what they were saying, it really got me curious because I'd never heard any of that before. I'd never seen any of that before. I'd never really seen an understanding of the mind that put clarity and well-being as an inalienable, effortless default essence that you could count on. You didn't have to work at. And I never saw, this was fascinating part. I'd never seen anything that basically said thought will never be a problem if you understand what thought is. It doesn't matter how dysfunctional the thought, it doesn't matter how negative the thought, it doesn't matter how powerful or strong or intense the thought. It's a thought. How's it going to be a problem? It's only when you misinterpret it that you create a problem for yourself. I thought, wow, so your state of mind, your well-being can improve. You don't even need different thought. All you need is just a bit more perspective. And what I realized through seeing that is that it was my belief in my insecure, dissatisfied thought that had ruined my relationships. And here I've been looking at the dynamic, the other person, I mean, 1,000,001 other variables. And I realized in that moment, I will never ruin another one of my relationships knowingly. I never have to do that again. I never have to do that again. And that was what, 35 years ago. And that's been true. Because if my relationship's not going well, I always look to myself and I'm not feeling good. If I'm not feeling good, then my mind's not trustworthy. If my mind's not trustworthy and I don't call myself on it, then I'm ruining that relationship for me. And other people don't like that very much either. They're going to love you a lot to take that in stride. So it was enlightening because all of a sudden I realized, oh my God, that issue is solved, is completely solved. And pretty much every issue I was up against at the time solved on its own. So whereas I was very socially anxious and insecure, that solved because I knew, but for my thinking, I was perfectly happy and comfortable. So I started to really enjoy being around other people. And I knew it. And when I didn't enjoy it, I didn't make anything out of it. Like, oh, I'm too profound for these things, or I'm too insecure. Or it was just, oh, you're not really, you're not really in the space to enjoy this. You could. So that issue solved itself. My career started taking off. That issue solved itself. So pretty much everything I was up against at that time, and it was magical. It really felt like, oh, I've been let in on the secret here. I've been let in on. It takes no effort to be in a state of, I don't know what you'd say, like a state of neutral purity. And everything works better when you're in that state. Before I'd learned the principles, I was literally addicted to martial arts because it was the only time I put my thinking aside. That addiction went away. And not only did that addiction go away because I knew my well-being didn't depend on going to training, I enjoyed my training more. And not only did I enjoy it more, I was better at it because I wasn't so distracted and preoccupied. And the the experience of catching a glimpse of mind and thought, and I guess consciousness, but I didn't see it at that time, was just changed everything about me so naturally. So one of the other things that was true about me is I was really fearful of flying. I was really fearful of flying. I hated flying. I still did it, but I hated it. And without me knowing, it became my favorite thing. And it happened so naturally that it was years before I realized, oh, I used to hate this. And now it's my favorite thing. And I only realized because I heard myself tell somebody, oh, I'm going to the East Coast. And they, oh, well, you travel a lot. That must be a drag. Oh, no, I love flying. Oh, flying? Hold on a second. I used to hate flying. So it was just amazingly profound. But even more profound than that was once I'd experienced, oh, there's something to this. I mean, I didn't really know what it was. And I didn't really, I mean, even at that stage, I didn't even really know that the principles was a truth. I just thought, wow, they've really discovered something that has an impact. I didn't know, was it another theory or it really had, and it really showed itself to be of significance because of the effect it had on me. Just naturally, the effect it had on me. And it wasn't until years later that I'd really started to see, wow, I think this might be a truth. So I kept waiting to get to the exception where it wouldn't work, I kept waiting to get to in my life or in my client's life. Oh yeah, this is a bridge too far. This will never be solved by talking about thought. But that's my job, is assume it's thought until proven otherwise. So I talked to them about thought, or I'd consider to myself that what I was experiencing was nothing more than a thought, and things would change. It was utterly magical. Things would change. And it's that is an even bigger difference than the change I had when I first learned the principles, is realizing that we're on the trail, like we're on the trail of a fundamental truth, like we got the scent of a fundamental truth. And no matter what happens to you, whenever you get stuck, you can go back to that. And every time I've gone back to that, I found my freedom again. I found my well-being again. And one of the things that I've really been talking to people about lately is you have no idea what a shift in your level of clarity, a shift in your level of consciousness will do for you in any situation. It will always be more profound than you ever thought possible. It will always make more of a difference than you ever thought possible. It's so far, it always seems to be the thing. And it's that potential that's inconceivable to us that we keep discovering nuggets of, that I think is, to me, is the most profound part of it. And the part that in my current work, I'm trying to put on the table for people. Because actually, going back to Sphere's point, why is it that it doesn't really catch on? Well, one reason is people aren't listening and they don't know it, in my training experience. And the other reason is when you talk to them about it, they imagine the outcome given their current frame of reference. Like, we're working with a company at the moment and there's two people in the group and they're not listening, right? They're just not listening. So I said, oh, how are you finding the program? Yeah, well, I pretty much know all about this, but they're not happy. They're not content. Then they are insecure. And I'm thinking, why would you think? So I took them each out for a coffee to talk to them about it. And basically, each of them in their own way say, yeah, I've been in a really bad place and now I'm in a better place. And I'm like, oh, I get it. I get it. And the thing that they hadn't considered is that is what we're talking about, but it doesn't stop there. Like, there's endless potential, but that's not in their world. So then the question is, well, how do people get the chance to see that there's something way beyond their world? Because I was talking to them about that when we had a coffee, and you could see them thinking, yeah. And it's that part that is challenging, but that's where all the promise is like, there is so much inconceivable potential for richer, deeper experiences, richer, deeper understandings, whole different things to happen in your life without you really working on it. Different options to occur to you without you even thinking of it. I mean, there's just this untapped magic that's just infinite. And in my experience over the years, it's so funny because the principles is the most relevant thing I know about. I'm disproportionately respectful and interested in that. But even within that, sometimes it gets small within my mind, like, oh, it's about me and my thinking, me and my thinking, me and my state of mind. And it gets kind of, I start using the principles within my frame of reference. Whereas actually the point of it is like, your frame of reference, you can't see it from a map of the principles. Like, as you go up from the earth, you see people get smaller and smaller. I think if the principles are infinite and you look down from infinite and you're like, where's my frame of reference now? You can't even see it. And the beauty of the principles is it gives us a chance to look towards understanding that isn't based on our frame of reference. Mind, thought, and consciousness is not based on our frame of reference. It's not based on anything we know. It allows us to look towards something so uncompromisingly fundamental. It's beyond anything we know. Thought as a spiritual power, a spiritual capability, mind as a spiritual essence, consciousness as a spiritual awareness. And now I don't know about you, but when I say that, that's inconceivable to me. But that's the point. At the point it becomes conceivable, I'm definitely misunderstanding it because I got my head around it and I put it into an understandable unit. And in my understanding of the principles, whenever I've done that, I feel very proud of myself, but I stop having any kind of impact in my own life, like my own life plateaus. And then in my work, it gets very structured but very empty. So I got interested in this is so funny. I got interested in the principles because I was paid as a researcher. But the significance of it came out of just that pure interest. And I think it's because Sydney Banks discovered and communicated a fundamental truth in a way that resonated with people that couldn't see it, so that they could get a feel for it and they could be drawn out of their thinking into a deeper realization. And that's been the value of it for me. And what's really interesting is I could list hundreds of differences it's made in my life, from like really superficial things, you know, passing my driving test, to like really profound things like my deeper experience of happiness and love and life. But it really, each time, it's just stumbling back on that infinite nature of what the principles point to, rather than the construction of it that I've created in my own head currently. And as to what I do now, then I'm kind of feeling it's time to let you guys talk. After I got affected by the principles, I was working in hostels for the homeless, and I was up one night doing a night shift, and there was a guy there that was talking about his whole life as a schizophrenic. And I was listening to him, and I could really see, you have well-being. Like, you have well-being, you have wisdom. There's nothing wrong with you. You could see it in the way that he was talking. But I thought, he doesn't know that. And I thought, I'm totally made this up, but I thought, if I tell him that, he's going to think I'm crazy. He's not going to listen to me. So in that moment, I realized, God, it's not just me that doesn't understand this. We live in a world where what I've been learning is invisible to everybody. It's not on the table. I thought, I want to spend my life getting it on the table for everybody. And I went and trained with George and Linda to be able to see how to go about that. But in the work that we did, what really resonated with me, like what spoke to me, and I can see it's because of my experiences, this needs to get into the mainstream. This needs to get into the mainstream, because in the mainstream, outside of the mainstream, we all agree, oh, there are some people need help, right? But what about the mainstream? They need help. Right? The normal level of consciousness of adults is not neutral. It's not clear. It's not deeper. And the things that adults are looking for come from that. So they're looking for it. And in my mind, there's no reason people shouldn't be in a clear, happy, content state of mind. It's natural. It's only misunderstanding in the way. So what I'm up to is trying to bring that about, or trying to help bring that about, a shift in the normal mainstream understanding and state of mind. And so far, I've chosen to do it through working with businesses, because it works for the organization and it works for the individual. In my mind, there's a very compelling logic for it. But then once we're in the conversation, they get to have these discoveries that are profound, not just for the business, but for the people within it. So,
well, thanks for the introduction.
Yeah, there. Yeah, good. Thank you.
Well, we would like to invite any one of you who wants to ask a question. Just raise your hand, and I'll give you and unmute yourself, of course. If anyone wants to, yes, there's Yvonne.
Yvonne has a hand up.
Hi, Aaron. Hi, everybody.
Hi, yeah.
I don't have a question, but I want to thank you, Aaron, because when I listened to your YouTube films,
yes,
I got really, the feeling you radiated in that clips that I saw really got to me. You know, I really got happy, because you were happy saying, I realized I don't have to do anything. And I thought, wow, that's true. I don't have to do anything. And it really impacted me to get more lighthearted, even also in working with the principals, although that's still very difficult. And I'm not officially working, but, you know, doing all sorts of people in my surroundings, helping them. But so that just wanted to thank you.
That's
So
great.
that's it.
Thank you.
Because it also realized it is the feeling that's more important also. Although you're very clear in everything you explain also. So thank you.
No, but you're right, Yvonne. It really is the feeling. And there have been lots of times in my life where I've had the clarity without the feeling. And it took me a fairly long while to register. Oh no, that does matter. Yeah. And
there's one thing I was you were saying about talking to the schizophrenic.
Yes.
I still find it very difficult to see the health in other people when they're really, well, more psychiatric.
Yes.
I've worked in psychiatry, so that's still a bit, you know, you're so trained in seeing all the pathology.
Yes.
And how to be careful around that, blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
That's a thing that I find very difficult.
Yeah. Well, in a way, Yvonne, you don't have to see it. You just have to allow yourself to consider that it's there. You know, so you don't have to see it because, you know, when people are highly disturbed, you're not going to see it. You're just going to see wildness, right? But if you're willing to consider, well, what if the same health and consciousness I have is there too? Because the trap that happens is because you don't see it, you forget it's there, right? So then it's not in your consciousness, it's not in your mind that there's something reliable within the person, there's something healthy within the person, there's something intelligent within the person, right? And so you don't see it. But if you're willing to consider it's there, when it's visible, you'll see it. The problem is we forget about it. That's what the problem is. We forget about it.
Yeah, and you get in your head.
Yeah.
Instantly.
And you get in your head. Yeah.
Instantly,
and then
because you think, oh God, how I'm going to help this person, or
yeah. That's the thing. I'm glad you said that, because then how that comes back is then, in a way, you start from the foundation. And the foundation is, what's my feeling? Oh, I'm flustered. Okay, well, this is not about them then. Okay, I'm flustered. How come I'm flustered? Well, in theory, I'm flustered because I'm having disturbed thought. Oh, disturbed thought. So that's probably not useful. No, it's not useful. Oh, so don't worry about that. Yeah, don't worry about that. Okay, now what? Well, when you feel better, which will happen pretty naturally when you're not worrying about your flustered thought. Oh, yeah, I feel better. Okay, now what do you see? Oh, it doesn't look so bad. Okay, so go and listen from that feeling. Then you're good. See, you start from you, and then you work out from there. You know, you work forward from there. And then what's really interesting, Yvonne, is as soon as things stop working and you're like, oh, they're not listening, or they're too crazy, or they're resistant. Okay, let's go back to the beginning. Where are you at? Well, I'm frustrated. Why? Well, because they're not listening. No, come on. Mind, consciousness, and thought. I give you a clue. Well, because they haven't been listening for 3 days. Oh, remember the clue. What's your feeling? I'm frustrated. What's frustrated? Oh, disturbed thought. Okay, disturbed thought. Why am I listening to that? I won't be seeing things clearly. Oh, okay, cool. Oh, I feel better. Maybe I should start over. Okay, start over. Okay.
Yeah,
it's
thank
so
you.
simple.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Yes.
Yeah. And it's when we forget that, we get awry in our mind, and then we just try to keep going. And you know, it's like those robots that bang against the wall and
Yes.
And that's what I love about it. It's so simple. You can always come back to it. And you'll start on solid ground and then move forward from there. Now, if you forgive me, Yvonne, the other thing I was going to say is don't worry about working with people in a sense that just make it your business that to the best of your ability, people know what you're doing. People know what you're doing, right? Now, out of the people that, oh, what do you do, Yvonne? Well, I'm doing this new approach, however you would say it. X number of people are going to be like, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. See? And then how at whatever rate is right for you, things will start to move, things will move along.
Yeah, except for when you meet people like my son, who instantly goes, "Oh yeah, I know all about that. Yeah, it's about the thought."
Yeah. Yeah.
Or
Then
he
he's
says
not-
you're in some kind of cult, or what are you doing?
Yeah,
Or,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, we don't worry about that then. Okay, so you're not one of those people. In other words, you come across people in your life, most of whom, in my experience, it won't really resonate with straight away. But there will be people that it does. And those are the people where something, you know, that's where your work will take place.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of getting comfortable talking about what you do, not worrying about the people who aren't interested, and just keep going. You'll be surprised, I think. I think you'll be surprised. But let's see.
Thank
So
you.
your son's not going to be your first client.
No, my son's not going to be but he needs it so much, he really
I know.
needs it. So it's so difficult not to try.
I know.
And you cannot try, that,
I
but
know.
it's so
I
difficult.
know. But you know what we found with our kids was they took they took notice of the way I was, and they absolutely ridiculed me for trying to talk to them about it. They would shut down and I'm not your client, stop talking that rubbish to me, blah blah blah. But the way I was, they logged it, they absorbed it, they respected it. And a couple of years ago, when my daughter finished school, she went traveling, and she actually stayed with another free principles person in another country, because I was, tried to say she had some people she knew. And they said, wow, it was really nice to hear your daughter talk about how much she got from the principles from you guys. I was like, she what? But she never said that. She would never say that to us. So you never know. You it's the same again. It's like we look after us. Like I'm my first client. And then the more I'm my first client, the better off I am. And then that helps everything.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Really nice. Thank you for sharing.
It's wonderful to hear that, Aaron. I have a son of 33.
Yes.
And he keeps astonishing me of how much he picked up in the last few years. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And I suddenly hear him say things and say, wait a minute, I never told you that. In some way he picked it up, and I don't know how.
Yeah.
It's amazing how that happens.
Yeah.
And yeah, really wonderful. And I think the point is, I've been a coach for 25 years now. I'm over 25 years now. I was very early to understand you should never try to coach your family. That's disastrous. So I stopped doing that at some stage, and I just went about doing my thing. And then 5, almost 6 years ago, I ran into the principles, and that changed my life, at least. And they notice it. The whole family notices that I'm changing. I'm changing my behavior. I'm changing my approach of things. and they reflect that in some way. And that's amazing. And that's beautiful. And that's the beauty of this understanding too.
Yeah, it is.
Well, anyone else?
Yeah, what's on your minds? What are there topics you want to talk about? Things you want to? I'm going to turn on the light.
Annelies has a question, I think.
Okay.
I do. And I know it's a long time. Oh, there you are.
Here I am.
I'm sorry. I know it's a long time ago, but still I'm curious about your research.
Yes.
Like, how did you go about your research and what did you find and did it make a difference?
Well, the research at the time, George was writing a book. You may have seen it. It's not in print.
Not anymore.
The Renaissance in Psychology. Yeah, there you go.
There it is.
Psychology. And one of the things he wanted to do in that book was compare the principles to other psychological theories and approaches. So he employed me to do that, to basically look at all the psychological theories and look at the principles and compare them. And the way I did that was I said to George, well, you know, if I'm going to research what you do, I'm going to have to see it for myself, And I expected him to say, oh, no. But he was like, oh, great. Okay, great. So I went out to LaConna and I spent a good amount of my time in the university libraries in Seattle and in Bellingham and looking at all the theories, all the academic papers and textbooks and about different theories and therapies. And then the rest of the time I spent sitting in with George and his clients. So I got on the theory side, what stood out to me was the principles had a completely different understanding than every other psychology. And actually, compared to the principles, the other psychologies were more similar to each other. So there was no psychology other than the principles that didn't require an intervention. Every other psychology thought something had to change. You had to actually get in there and change something in order to improve things. The principles, you didn't need to change anything. Everything was fine already. You just didn't understand it properly. So it could stay the same and you could be totally different. That didn't exist anywhere else that I came across. And then the other part was there was no other psychology in which you were already perfectly mentally healthy. That was the profoundest difference. Every other psychology assumed you were messed up, you would be messed up. None of them even thought mental health, happiness, well-being, contentment, it was even possible. It was never talked about. You could improve and be less messed up, but you weren't going to be great because people have bad thoughts, they have bad experiences, they have conditioning, they have upbringing. And to the principles, none of that was relevant because you were perfectly mentally healthy and it was only your misunderstanding of your thoughts that were going to get in the way. And that got my attention. I'm like, oh my God, this is completely unlike any other existing theory. That doesn't happen very often. Like I knew from my academic work, this does not happen very often. Most theories are evolutions. You don't get utter departures. So that got my interest. And then the other thing that got my interest, there was obviously something to it because everyone that did the program came out looking fantastic. And it didn't matter. It really didn't matter what their problem was. So the first clients I sat in was a couple where there'd been where one of them had an affair. Nothing changed. They both ended up really happy, really content, didn't feel like they had a problem, and nothing had changed. I'm like, what? And it didn't matter what the presenting problem was. everyone ended up happier and contented than most adults you ever see, and they didn't feel like their problem was a problem. And it didn't matter what they came in with, and you couldn't see that and think, okay, here's a completely different understanding, and here's outcomes like you've never seen before. That has to be related. That can't be a coincidence. And I think that resonated with me intuitively. Seeing those two things resonated with me intuitively. And it's funny because it wasn't until I was doing the research that I actually took a look at what was being said neutrally, and that's what I was missing. I was listening to what they were saying through my opinions, but looking at it neutrally, it was like, wow, that is really different, really intriguing. Yeah, really different and really intriguing. And it really got my attention. I came out of the research thinking, what if that is true? Like, what if that's true? Like, what if they're right? And all this, like, and what was really nice about the principles is it was so simple and fundamental, it was completely testable. Like, I felt like I could put it to the test in my life. I didn't need to do a research project. It's like, oh, if I'm treating thought as if it's real, that's a problem. If it's all thought, then I can try that with anything. And if I stop doing that, things should improve and I should feel better and things will work better. And it worked in every instance. Does that at all answer? Yeah, go ahead, Annelies.
It actually does. And you know what? I'm always so puzzled about why don't they do anything with it? Because sometimes I read stuff in scientific magazines and I think, oh, if only I had, I don't know, a letter or some prepared thing that I could send, that there is something else out there.
Yeah. I think that's actually a really good idea, because there's a lot more research being done over the past 5-6 years, and it's just getting more. And actually, there's the Principles Research Center, I think it's called. That's a really good idea for them.
Yeah.
I think that's something they should seriously consider
Only
doing.
a couple of months ago, I was reading this article and I thought, oh my God, they're going to tell me something like principle-like.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. And I thought, oh no, they should know about this.
Yeah, I know.
But I'm not the right person, or at least I didn't do the research. I'm not maybe the best placed person to do something like that, but it would be great if there could be some, I don't know, standard reply.
Yeah.
Like, hey, we have something else to tell. Would you be interested in listening?
That's such a good idea. It's a really good idea. I wonder, I mean, that's something the 3PGC could do as well, because it's an independent body.
Yeah, because we are all talking about, oh, this should be more mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
But if any of us read something anywhere, wouldn't it be great if you could just send a letter and say, hey, I don't know, I'd like to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Might I intervene? Because there are reports available from the 3PRC, and you can download those, and you can send them in if you want to.
Yeah.
I know. Well, Adriaan Denkers is active with that, and he's helping. What's her name again? Caroline? No.
Jean Catherine.
Jean Catherine. Yeah. He's helping her promote on this subject. And there is material available, so we can download that and we can send it up if you want to. I know Adrian is, and we're trying to set up a little bit stuff here in the Netherlands. I know him, and I talk to him every few months or so. We'll see how we are going to improve this. But it's hard, yeah, of course. But we have to keep on tracking, and there might be a very interesting source to understand why this is so hard for mere humans to understand this. There's a nice little book from what's he called, Chris Niebauer, Professor Chris Niebauer, and he's written the book No Self, No Problem, and he explains a very nice way how the left brain and the right brain fight for understanding, and mainly understanding, and understanding is our biggest problem, really. Because it's doing all kinds of stuff which is in a direct conflict with the understanding of the principles. So that was my 5 cents. Sorry.
Yeah, anyway, thank you for telling us a little bit more about it. I was thinking a nice, understandable text that wouldn't have to have you go through the entire thing that they've got, something nice, lighter.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Because we're, in terms of the work that we do, we're always looking for ways to do that where it's relatable, it's understandable, but it doesn't put it in a box or trivialize it or write it off, or keeps the door open to further understanding.
Aaron, can I ask another question?
Yes, of course.
Why is this book so, not in print? And it's been, I showed it to Bill Pettit once, and he said, "Oh, you can't read that."
Well, because it is a little bit of history. Yeah, everybody's sitting comfortable. So basically, during the years that Sydney Banks was alive, he would talk to the people around him about the principles. And this is my interpretation. He would talk to the people around him about the principles. They would get affected, and then they would develop an understanding, and he would feel like it was off track in some way, it'd gone away from the essence, and then he would bring them back and restate it in a way that, tried to deal with the way they misinterpreted it before. So when he started, if you listen to his early recordings, it's completely unformulated. The vocabulary, is unspecific, and I'm not criticizing it. It's just, right. And by the time you get to the Long Beach lectures, it's formulated as the 3 principles. Okay. And about halfway through that process, when the psychologists started taking it seriously and they really got affected, they essentially tried to find ways to formulate it that they felt they could bring to psychology. So they basically took what they learned from Sid and they tried to conceptualize it. And what it ended up with is they managed to distill the 3 principles into 11 concepts.
Right.
And not one of them was mind, not one of them was thought, and not one of them was consciousness. There were 11 other things. And Sid was, understandably frustrated, and basically said, look, you need to, and that's when he started with the 3 principles. Look, there's 3 principles. There's 3 principles, and here's how emotions fit in that, and here's how relationships fit in that, and like all the things that they've been talking about, here's how they fit. You got to look deeper, you got to go more fundamental, because you got to realize this was he was he was teaching and developing them. So there was that iterative process, right? Like just like we do with people we work with. It's like you say something and they grasp it, but they go off in this direction. No, I'm talking about this. So the Renaissance in psychology was just a part of that George really painstakingly wrote it, took ages to write it, but by the time he finished it, Sid was about done with all the conceptualizing and basically said, look, there's 3 principles. And like poor George was the Renaissance in psychology was like the epitome of what he was talking about. So you know, Sid basically said you can't, I mean, my memory is, this could be wrong, but basically like it was just it wasn't simple and fundamental enough, and it wasn't based around the principles. I mean, you look at it's a huge book, and if you listen to some of the talks that Sid was doing at the time, he's like, you people are writing huge books. And you know, it wasn't just George, that's where everybody was at. They were, how are we going to conceptualize this to be palatable to the psychological community? And then Sid basically said, no, you don't do that. You keep it simple, you keep it fundamental. And that's when he was telling them, look, you got to talk about the essence, you got to talk, it's 3 principles. You need to talk about 3 principles. And so pretty much as soon as it was published, George decided to withdraw it because he didn't want it to pull in a different direction that Sid was pushing, talking.
Yeah. Well, I finally got it in my hands. Took me quite some trouble.
Off the black market, you go.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I was just curious, why was this so earmarked? Let's call it that way.
Well, it wasn't earmarked. Is there anything that was a symptom of that over conceptualization? People just got rid of it.
Yeah.
Because it was one of those, there were several moments like that I saw where, you know, Sid got clearer and said, look, okay, no, look, here's where we're going wrong. We're going to do it like this. And yeah.
Okay.
And it was just
Wonderful. Yeah. I've read it once and I haven't looked at it since. It was just lying there. And but yeah. Anyone else?
Well, it was, yeah, anybody else? Anything on your mind? Any?
Well, thanks for the explanation anyway. That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
No problem.
I got a few questions answered.
Right.
Okay. No one else? It's almost 9 o'clock, so
Okay.
let's call it a night then.
Well, it was really nice to have an hour with you this evening. Thank you very much for coming.
It's wonderful to have you had here.
It was a pleasure.
And it's well, hopefully we can do it again one day.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Aaron.
Pleasure. Real pleasure.
Oh, Aaron, I was just thinking, is there a conference this year or?
Yes.
Yes.
So there is a conference. It will be virtual. You can set up what we're calling a watch party, which is to get together with some other people and watch it together on the Sunday. I think it's that weekend of the 11th of June, whatever that Sunday, Monday, Tuesday is.
Okay, but not live in London.
Not live in London. No, not live in London. Sorry. We plan to do it live next year.
Okay.
We just really weren't sure about it this year. And yeah, we just really weren't sure about it this year. It looked like
I'll save my money. Well, I have to save anyway. I haven't got the money now, so I'll save for next year.
Yeah,
Because
save
I'd
for
love
next
to do
year.
it live. I'd
Say
love
that
to meet
again.
some people. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the nice thing about this year when we're doing it virtually, because of the whole economic situation, we've really brought the prices down for this year because it seems like it's, you know, things are tough for a lot of people. Expenses are going up for most people. So we wanted to make it more affordable, and that was part of the question about doing it in person. You know, it cost quite a lot of money to put it on in person, and if it wasn't going to be affordable for people and people weren't going to be able to come, it was, you know, we felt it was, you know, we were unsure about how many people would be able to come in person.
Yeah, it's true. It's hard times. Yes, I would have loved to do the book thing, but that was too expensive also for now. For the time being.
3PGC book thing.
Yeah, the reading the books of Sydney
Yeah,
Banks.
Sydney Banks. Yeah.
Yeah, I would have loved to join that, but
Keep an eye out, because I think, are you a member of 3PGC? Are you an apprentice practitioner?
yeah, I'm an apprentice. Yes.
Yeah. They might be offering something new about that soon. So keep an eye out.
I will. Thank you.
Yeah.
And we are planning to organize watch parties in
Oh,
several
great.
locations in the Netherlands.
Great.
So we'll keep you informed.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
good idea. Thanks.
Okay, well, let's then shut down the recording.